On an autumn afternoon in Boston, as orange-tinted leaves danced to the ground, Elizabeth Miller gazed out the library window. She had worked as a librarian at this local library for 15 years, finding her place in the quiet world of books. With her long brown hair tied back, her face showed both intelligence and kindness. "Elizabeth, have you finished organizing the new history section?" her colleague Susan asked quietly. "Almost done. I'll finish it tomorrow morning," Elizabeth smiled in response. Elizabeth's parents, George and Martha, ran a small real estate company in the Boston suburbs. George was a well-known figure in the local real estate industry. Martha was a sociable woman who frequently appeared at local charity events. Among their two daughters, the one they always boasted about was their younger daughter Vanessa. Vanessa worked as a manager at an upscale boutique on Newbury Street. She was glamorous, sociable, and ambitious. With her appearance that seemed to have stepped out of a fashion magazine and her connections in society, she was constantly praised by her parents. "Elizabeth, you haven't forgotten about dinner tonight, have you?" Elizabeth held her breath at Martha's phone call. "Tonight was a family dinner." "Yes, I remember, Mother. I'll be there at 7. Vanessa is bringing wonderful news. That girl is truly shining." Martha's voice was filled with pride. "Do you have anything new going on?" "Nothing special," Elizabeth answered quietly. In truth, she did have big news, but it wasn't the right time to share it yet. The Miller family dinner, as usual, revolved around Vanessa. She continued to talk about the latest gossip in Boston's social circles and her success stories at the boutique. Her parents gasped in admiration at her every word, as if her words were enchanted. "Now, for my news," Vanessa paused deliberately before her cheesecake dessert. "I've started dating David Collins." "David Collins?" "From Maritas Pharmaceuticals." George's eyes widened in surprise. "Yes. He's the sales director. Yesterday, he took me to an ultra-luxurious restaurant," Vanessa said triumphantly. "That's wonderful. His father is a member of the golf club, isn't he?" Martha was excited. After dinner, as Elizabeth was clearing the dishes, Martha approached her. "Elizabeth, you need to find someone nice soon. You're already 36. Time is running out." "Mother." Elizabeth cut off her words. Then, gathering courage, she said, "Actually, I'm engaged." Martha's hands stopped washing the dishes. "What? To whom?" "Michael Harrison. I met him at the library." A complex expression appeared on Martha's face. "Well, when can we meet him?" 2 weeks later, Elizabeth brought Michael to her parents' house. Michael Harrison was a tall man with an intellectual air. He greeted her parents with a modest demeanor and answered their questions politely. However, his simple suit and humble manner clearly didn't make a strong impression on her parents. "So, Mr. Harrison, what do you do for a living?" George asked. "I work as an editor at a publishing house," Michael answered quietly. After dinner, Vanessa pulled Elizabeth aside. "Hey, isn't Michael a bit plain? Can he really make you happy?" Elizabeth smiled. "We love each other. That's what matters." "Well, I suppose at your age, that's the best you can do," Vanessa shrugged. 6 months later, news arrived that Vanessa was engaged to David Collins. Her parents were overjoyed and threw a grand engagement party at a luxury hotel. Elizabeth and Michael's engagement was overshadowed by Vanessa's glittering news. "Elizabeth, why isn't Michael more involved in the wedding preparations?" Martha asked one day. "David goes with Vanessa every weekend to look at venues. He's busy," Elizabeth answered. In reality, Michael wasn't very enthusiastic about wedding preparations, often citing work commitments. However, when they were alone, Michael was like a completely different person. He was warm, thoughtful, and gradually showing Elizabeth his true self. "Trust me, He often said. Everything will work out. Elizabeth believed him. She was preparing for a modest but heartfelt wedding. Regardless of her family's reaction, she was determined to follow her chosen path. 2 weeks before the wedding, Elizabeth visited a small church in the Boston suburbs. The white chapel glowed peacefully in the morning light. It wasn't a fancy venue, but it was a special place for Elizabeth and Michael. It was here that they had their first serious conversation and confirmed their feelings for each other. "Ms. Miller, here's the final schedule for the day," the church coordinator handed her some documents. "Music, flower arrangements, everything is confirmed." Elizabeth smiled as she reviewed the documents. It was a small wedding, but planned with attention to every detail. The flower arrangements were specially ordered from a local florist, and the cake was being made by a former pastry chef from the nursing home where she volunteered. "Thank you. It's perfect," Elizabeth replied to the coordinator when her phone started ringing in her bag. Looking at the screen, she saw it was a call from Vanessa. "Hello? Elizabeth. Come home right now. I have important news." Vanessa's voice had its usual excitement. "I'm at the venue for a final check. I'll come later." "No, right now. Mom and Dad are waiting too." Elizabeth sighed deeply. Vanessa always prioritized her own convenience. "All right. I'll be there within an hour." When she arrived at her parents' house, Vanessa and her parents were waiting in the living room. An expensive champagne had been opened and poured into glasses on the table. Vanessa's face showed obvious joy and a scheming expression. "What's the news?" Elizabeth asked, and Vanessa stood up, holding David's arm. "We've set the date for our wedding," Vanessa said in an excited voice. "We've booked the wonderful Grand Hotel. With David's father's connections, we got special permission even though there was a waiting list." "That's great," Elizabeth said. "When is it?" Vanessa grinned. "May 15th, starting at 2 p.m. Elizabeth's body froze. May 15th at 2 p.m. It was exactly the same day and time as her wedding with Michael. "But, that's the day of my wedding. I've already sent out the invitations," Elizabeth said quietly. "I know," Vanessa shrugged as if she meant no harm. "But this is a special opportunity. The Grand Hotel. It's nothing compared to your little church." As Elizabeth was at a loss for words, George cleared his throat. "Elizabeth, you should postpone your ceremony. You're the older sister, so you should give way." "But Dad. I've already made all the reservations, sent out invitations." Elizabeth's voice trembled. "Your wedding isn't going to be anything special anyway," George coldly declared. "Important executives from David's company will be coming to Vanessa's wedding. It's a big opportunity for our real estate business." Martha also set her glass on the table. "Elizabeth, please understand. Vanessa's wedding will be a major event in society. You and Michael, well, something more modest suits you better." Anger welled up in Elizabeth's heart, but she didn't show it on her face. As she remained silent, Vanessa added even more pressure. "Your shabby dress, your cheap venue. It would be better for everyone if you cancelled," she said condescendingly. "Come on, Michael is just a regular employee at a publishing house, right? David is an executive at a major pharmaceutical company. The future prospects are different." "Yes, and David's parents are such respectable people," Martha chimed in. "His father is even the president of the golf club. Many guests will attend. Your small ceremony should give way to theirs." Elizabeth quietly looked at her parents and Vanessa. Her heart was filled with anger and sadness, but she didn't express it. This was her family. A family that always prioritized Vanessa over her and belittled her feelings and efforts. "I understand," was all she said as she stood up. "Really? Elizabeth is so understanding after all." Vanessa rejoiced. You'll call to cancel right away, won't you? Elizabeth didn't answer, but took her bag and quietly left the house. As she closed the front door, she heard Vanessa's triumphant laughter and her mother's words, "My clever daughter." Once in her car, Elizabeth's phone rang. It was from Michael. "How did it go?" His quiet voice calmed Elizabeth. "Terrible," Elizabeth briefly explained the situation. "Come to my place," Michael said. "Let's talk." Michael's apartment was modest but orderly. He made Elizabeth tea and quietly listened to her story. "Vanessa is trying to have her wedding on the same day as mine. My parents are telling me to give way." Elizabeth's voice choked. Michael took her hand. "What do you want?" "Really?" "I want to have the wedding as planned," Elizabeth answered without hesitation. "I don't want our special day ruined by their selfishness." Michael's lips softened into a gentle smile. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll have the wedding as planned." "But my family." "It doesn't matter if your family doesn't come," Michael said quietly. "We have our own important people." Elizabeth looked into Michael's eyes. There was unwavering trust and love. She took a deep breath and made her decision. "Let's proceed as planned," she said. Michael gently embraced her. "Don't worry, everything will work out." Elizabeth nodded in his arms. She had no intention of giving up her life just because her family told her to. On the wedding day, the morning in Boston was clear. Elizabeth was preparing for the ceremony in the small church's bridal room. Michael's cousin Rebecca was helping with the final touches to her hairstyle. "You're truly beautiful, Elizabeth," Rebecca placed her hand on her shoulder. "Michael is a lucky man." Elizabeth smiled, but complicated feelings swirled inside her. There had been no contact from her parents since they strongly urged her to postpone the wedding. She had called several times but was met with cold responses. Contact with Vanessa had also ceased. "It's sad that your family isn't coming," Rebecca said gently. "But I'm really happy that you and other friends are here," Elizabeth answered honestly. "What matters is having people who sincerely bless the beginning of my new life." Looking out the window, she saw cars beginning to arrive in the church parking lot one after another. Elizabeth was a bit surprised. Her wedding with Michael was supposed to be small scale. They had only invited close friends, colleagues, and Michael's family. All together, there shouldn't have been even 50 people. "There seem to be quite a lot of people," Elizabeth said, and Rebecca approached the window. "Oh my! Aren't those luxury cars?" Rebecca exclaimed. In the church parking lot, Mercedes, BMWs, and even several Rolls-Royces were lined up. Men in suits were getting out one after another and heading to the church. "What's happening?" Elizabeth was confused. "This is my wedding, right?" At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and Michael's best friend Jason poked his head in. "Elizabeth, the guest list has grown a bit," he said with a smile. Michael mentioned a few extra guests. "A few?" Elizabeth's eyes widened. "Who are they?" "Boston's business leaders. And the person getting out of that black limousine, I think that might be the governor," Jason shrugged. "The governor?" Elizabeth's voice rose. "What is Michael?" Just then, a short message arrived from Michael. "Don't worry. Everything will work out. I love you." Elizabeth continued with her wedding preparations, puzzled by this strange situation. Her simple yet elegant wedding dress enhanced her delicate beauty. The pearl necklace that Michael's mother had given her softly glowed around her neck. As the start time of the ceremony approached, and Elizabeth was making her final preparations, the door suddenly burst open. There stood her parents, looking distraught, and Vanessa, who had been crying. "Elizabeth." Martha rushed toward her. "Why didn't you cancel the ceremony?" Elizabeth looked calmly at her mother. "I told you. We would proceed as planned." But Vanessa's ceremony. George began. I don't care. Vanessa interrupted. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her makeup was smeared. Hurry. David's parents and all his relatives are angry. Elizabeth was confused. What do you mean? At that moment, the door opened again, and Michael entered. Elizabeth was a bit surprised. It was said to be bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the wedding. But seeing Michael, she gasped. He was dressed in a high-end tailored tuxedo, looking as if he had stepped out of a magazine. What's going on, Michael? Elizabeth asked, and Michael took her hand. It seems that Vanessa and David's wedding venue was suddenly cancelled, Michael said calmly. Apparently, all of David's relatives have gathered, but they have no venue. Why? Elizabeth asked, and Vanessa stumbled over her words. Well, they hadn't actually made a reservation, Martha answered instead. Weariness mixed in her voice. Vanessa and David thought you would cancel your ceremony, so. Elizabeth was too shocked to speak. The plan to ruin her special day had come back to haunt them in this way. Elizabeth, please, George pleaded. Let Vanessa have the venue. David's relatives are all important people. His father is furious. We can't embarrass them. The future of the company is at stake, Martha added. If we give those people a bad impression, our real estate company is finished. Elizabeth looked at her parents. Parents who had always prioritized Vanessa and trampled on her feelings. They were now facing the consequences of their actions. Please, Elizabeth, Vanessa said, crying. Help me. David is angry. He's saying he'll break off the engagement. Elizabeth took a deep breath. Anger and sadness welled up, but she suppressed them. You told me to cancel my ceremony, she said quietly, but with a resolute attitude. But I decided to live my own life. I'm sorry, but the ceremony is about to begin. But, Elizabeth. As Martha began to plead, Michael stepped forward. This is our special day, Michael said firmly. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Miller, if you would like to attend your daughter's wedding, we certainly welcome you as guests. However, we cannot allow this ceremony to be interrupted. There was a dignity in Michael's voice that Elizabeth had never heard before. Her parents wore surprised expressions, and Vanessa broke down in tears. I hate you. Vanessa shouted. You've ruined my life. Michael placed his hand on Elizabeth's shoulder and said, It's our special day. Let's proceed as planned, and began to lead her to the ceremony. At that moment, noisy voices could be heard from outside the church. Looking through the window, they saw a middle-aged gentleman who had gotten out of a luxury car shouting at a young man who appeared to be David. It was clearly David's father. What is going on? No venue. What do you take my friends for? David was trembling as he made excuses. Dad, calm down. We're looking for another venue. Don't make me laugh. How will you clear this shame? Elizabeth moved away from the window and looked at Michael. His eyes held a determination she hadn't seen before. Michael, what's happening? Elizabeth asked, and Michael smiled gently. There's no time to explain everything, but I can tell you one thing, he gripped her hand firmly. I will protect you. And today, everything will be revealed. Elizabeth was confused, but her trust in Michael was unwavering. She nodded and adjusted her wedding veil. Let's go, she said. Let's start our wedding. Michael opened the door and led her into the hallway. As the church organ began to play the majestic wedding march, Elizabeth placed her hand on Michael's arm, ready to take the first step into her new life. Her parents and Vanessa stood dumbfounded. Dad, Mom, Elizabeth turned back. Take your seats. This is my wedding. As the pastor's solemn voice echoed in the church, Elizabeth stood beside Michael. Sunlight streaming through the church windows softly illuminated her wedding dress. She looked ahead with a slightly nervous expression, but when she felt Michael's gaze, she smiled at him. At the back of the church, David's father was red-faced with anger. Around him, disgruntled relatives gathered, muttering complaints to each other. David, with a pale face, was trying to appease them, but to no effect. What a disaster! I didn't even want to attend the sister of his fiancée's wedding. David's father shouted. What were you thinking? Dad, lower your voice, David desperately pleaded. Somehow, another venue. Silence. David's father cut off his words. I won't forget today. This concerns the honor of Marita's Pharmaceuticals. The ceremony proceeded solemnly, and Elizabeth and Michael vowed their love to each other. When they exchanged rings and the pastor declared, I now pronounce you husband and wife, applause erupted from the entire congregation. Elizabeth looked at Michael with a face full of happiness. Tears streamed down her cheeks. The reception was to be held in a small hall adjacent to the church, but to Elizabeth's surprise, the venue was transformed beyond recognition. The hall, which was supposed to have a simple setting, was adorned with elegant white flowers and soft candlelight, creating an atmosphere like a banquet room in a luxury hotel. Michael, this is. Elizabeth was at a loss for words, and Michael gently squeezed her hand. I made a few changes, he smiled. I wanted it to be a place worthy of you. The reception began, and it was time for the toast. Michael stood up and took his glass. The venue fell silent. Everyone, thank you for gathering on our special day, Michael said in a calm voice. Elizabeth, meeting you was the greatest fortune of my life. I am deeply grateful for your kindness, intelligence, and above all, your unwavering sincerity. Elizabeth looked at Michael with loving eyes. Today is also the day to show you all my true self, Michael continued. A small murmur spread through the venue. Elizabeth also tilted her head. I was introduced to Elizabeth as an editor at a publishing house, but in reality. Michael paused. I am the next president of Edwards International. The venue buzzed with excitement. Edwards International was one of the largest conglomerate corporations in North America. Its assets were said to amount to billions of dollars. David's face turned pale. The largest client of Marita's Pharmaceuticals was the medical division of Edwards International. I wanted to build genuine relationships, Michael continued quietly. I wanted to find someone who would love me for myself, not for my position or wealth. And Elizabeth was such a wonderful person. Tears welled up in Elizabeth's eyes. She had wondered why Michael sometimes was vague about his work, but she never imagined such a secret. David's father hurriedly approached Michael, trying to offer congratulations. Mr. Edwards, congratulations on your marriage. Our Marita's Pharmaceuticals. Michael calmly raised his hand to stop him. Mr. Collins, I'm sorry, but there's one more thing I want to reveal today. The venue fell silent again. Elizabeth looked at Michael. His expression had a sternness she had never seen before. It's about the treatment of my wife Elizabeth. Michael's voice was quiet but contained strong anger. I commissioned an investigation. It revealed that Vanessa Miller and David Collins deliberately planned their wedding on the same day as Elizabeth's to sabotage her ceremony, and they hadn't actually reserved a venue. Michael took out a piece of paper. This is a copy of emails between Vanessa and David. Elizabeth will definitely give in. She always does. We don't need to book a venue. No one cares about her ceremony anyway. The venue froze. All of David's relatives were looking at Vanessa with accusatory eyes. Vanessa was blushing intensely and hanging her head. I will have to seriously reconsider how to proceed with business with people who tried to ruin my wife's special day. Michael's words contained an obvious warning. David's father was furious. David. What have you done? I won't allow you to marry such a woman. Dad. David stumbled over his words. "This isn't what I heard," David said quietly to Vanessa. "You said Elizabeth would definitely cancel the ceremony." He began to remove his engagement ring. Vanessa broke down in tears. "David, please." In the silent venue, Elizabeth slowly stood up. Her expression was filled with sadness and determination. "Today is our day of blessing," she said quietly. "Let's put the past behind us." She looked at Vanessa. Her sister's face was red with tears and shame, and she couldn't meet Elizabeth's eyes. "Vanessa, I don't hold a grudge against you," Elizabeth said. "I'm just sad. We're sisters, yet why did it come to this?" Martha and George hung their heads in shame. Their faces showed regret. "Elizabeth. I'm sorry," Martha said in a trembling voice. "We were wrong." Vanessa, unable to bear it any longer, ran from the venue. David tried to chase after her but was grabbed by his father's arm and held back. Michael took Elizabeth's hand and smiled gently. "You're truly a wonderful person. This is one of the reasons I love you." Elizabeth looked into her husband's eyes and nodded slightly. Her heart was filled with complex emotions, but she felt that this day was the beginning of her new life. The reception continued, and the tense atmosphere gradually eased. Elizabeth and Michael chatted with friends, danced their first dance, and cut the cake. Seeing their happy figures, no one doubted that this marriage was based on true love. As the night deepened, Elizabeth occasionally looked toward her parents. They sat in a corner seat, talking quietly. Their expressions showed obvious regret. Elizabeth leaned against Michael and whispered, "Do you think I can reconcile with them someday?" Michael squeezed her hand and replied, "Time will heal. What's important is that you chose your own path. And that we walk together." Elizabeth smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. Her heart felt truly free for the first time. She had gained the freedom to live her own life, no longer bound by her family's expectations or comparisons. 3 months later, Elizabeth and Michael had returned from their honeymoon in France and Italy and were beginning life in their new home in the Boston suburbs. The house was an elegant mansion in an old style, with ancient oak trees lining the spacious garden. Elizabeth continued her work at the library while occasionally accompanying Michael to his social events. Michael was officially appointed as the president of Edwards International and was building his reputation in the business world. However, the center of their life was always their love and respect for each other. "Elizabeth, there was another call from your mother," Michael said at the breakfast table. The morning sun shone through the kitchen window, softly illuminating their faces. Elizabeth took her coffee cup and sighed slowly. She had received several apologetic calls and messages from her parents, but she wasn't ready yet. The wounds were too deep. "Maybe it's time to meet them," she said quietly. The next day, Elizabeth decided to meet her parents at a cafe in the suburbs. Martha and George were already seated. Their previously arrogant attitude had subsided, and they looked visibly tired. "Elizabeth." Martha stood up as soon as she saw her daughter. "Thank you so much for coming." "Mother, Father," Elizabeth greeted them quietly. "I'm truly sorry for hurting you," Martha teared up. "We spoiled Vanessa too much. We didn't consider your feelings." George also nodded. "We were wrong. We want your forgiveness." Elizabeth gazed at her parents' faces. Genuine regret could be seen in their eyes. "What about Vanessa?" she asked. "She's having a hard time," Martha sighed. Vanessa and David's engagement was broken off. David's family thoroughly rejected her, and David himself was in a precarious position at the company and was pushing the responsibility onto Vanessa. Vanessa had also quit her job at the upscale boutique and was holed up in her parents' house. With the economic recession, her parents' real estate company was struggling, and it wasn't easy to support her. "Vanessa says she wants to apologize," George said quietly. Elizabeth thought for a while and answered, "I need time." That night, after discussing it with Michael, she decided, family is family. Someday, the time to forgive might come. A few weeks later, Elizabeth met Vanessa. There was no trace of her once arrogant sister. A dejected young woman stood there. "I'm truly sorry," Vanessa said in a trembling voice. "I was crazy with jealousy. You were always kind and sincere, yet Elizabeth took a deep breath and suggested, "I may not be able to forgive right away, but we could try to repair our relationship little by little." Vanessa nodded through her tears. Michael continued the contract with David's company, but David himself was transferred to another department. Vanessa began attending a local community college, reassessing her life. On a night when the first snow announcing winter's arrival began to fall by the window, Elizabeth smiled quietly in Michael's arms. A warm fire burned in the fireplace of their new home, and pictures from their wedding adorned the walls. "Any regrets?" Michael asked, gently kissing her hair. Elizabeth shook her head. "Not for a moment. Meeting you gave me the courage to live as my true self." They continued their marriage built on love and sincerity, quietly but with deep happiness. And Elizabeth realized day by day that there are no wounds that time cannot heal.